Testing. Okay. We're gonna go ahead and start. And we have a guest speaker here today. Reverend Dr. Laura Thelander, who's going to talk about her work, special CPE program that's at Stillwater. That is the only one in the country that is like this. Okay, Ruth and Serene. Called out. We're starting. And apologies for the. We can't find the sound on the video that's going to come up. So,
but we're gonna figure it out.
We're gonna try, but we know.
Yeah, we'll figure out at least a plan B. Anyway, good morning, and really grateful to be here with you this morning. Grateful to, I know Pastor Peter's not here, but thanks to him and to Carol and Gary and the whole adult forum team for this invitation to share about social justice clinical pastoral education, our program and our work teaching chaplaincy and spiritual care skills. I am just a little background. They introduced me in worship. I am, just so you know, I'm an ELCA pastor. I've served in congregations and seminaries, and now I'm doing work as a certified educator for clinical pastoral education. And if you have no idea what clinical pastoral education means, we'll get to it. So don't worry. And I also want to just make a note, if when you came in, just so I don't forget, there was an article that was printed out. I think Carol took care of that. Thank you. That was published in right after Christmas in the Star Tribune by Pastor Angela Danker. She's an ELCA pastor and a journalist. She's been a contributing columnist for the Star Tribune, and she attended our December graduation. So take that, please take that home and read that through. Hopefully you're not reading it while I'm talking, because then we know that we're going off charts here. But I invite you to take that home with you, and it just gives you another glimpse into our program. But I want to begin with the vision for our work as social justice CPE. And this is the vision that guides and inspires our work, is to offer transformative spiritual care, to generate healing, justice, and restoration in the world. And that vision became a reality in the fall of 2019, when we offered the first ever unit of CPE with incarcerated students inside the walls of a prison in the United States. And to this day, we remain the only such program in the country. Now, it may be, I'll just say, if you can't see the print below, this is an image of a cell block in Stillwater prison. So it may be hard to imagine that this sort of transformative work could take place inside a maximum security prison, where literally every movement is controlled, where folks are highly restricted, where, you know, of the 1,200 men there, probably 600, at least 600 are there on homicide charges. So it might be hard to imagine that the sort of transformative healing work can take inside there. Could a place of punishment actually become a place where healing and transformation could occur? Could pervasive cycles of violence in our society be disrupted in a place like this, rather than perpetuated and reinforced? Well, this is the picture of our graduation, our first graduation back in 2019 in Stillwater. And it was this program that said that was kind of the reality of a vision that we had. And it also told us that, yes, healing can take place inside a facility like this. But before we get more into this, as I said, I promised to say a little bit more about what CPE is. just to give a show of hands, how many have heard of clinical pastoral education? Okay, so more haven't than have. First of all, clinical, it's CPE stands for Clinical Pastoral Education. So clinical pastoral education, it's these programs, I think, as Deborah mentioned in worship, they are offered all across the country. And they're offered to provide training and education for leaders from all faith backgrounds who want to further develop their spiritual care and chaplaincy skills. Most CPE programs are offered inside hospitals and long-term care centers. And I would just add another note that for Lutherans who are rostered leaders in the ELCA, CPE is a requirement in their education. So I think we have a couple folks in this room who've done a few units of CPE. So in order to become Pastor Peter, he would have had to have done a unit of CPE. I would also note that if you think about if you've been in the hospital and you had a chaplain there, that person was required to take not but 1, but 4 units of CPE in order for them to become a board certified chaplain in that facility. So imagine our centers, long-term care facilities, hospitals, prison, military, any place that has a professional chaplain. It's generally the case that person needs to have 4 units of CPE. So we've got folks training for chaplaincy, we've got folks who are preparing for ministry, and they're required to do a unit of CPE. So what makes social justice CPE unique is that we are offering CPE inside prison. We're bringing together incarcerated leaders, many of whom are serving life sentences, with seminarians and faith leaders from outside, from the community. Together, we form a peer group. And in this peer group, so I'll just say in this group here, you can probably identify the men who are incarcerated. They're wearing their prison-issued wardrobe. So those who are in either white t-shirts or gray sweatshirts or the blue shirts, those are the incarcerated men. The others in that are either the CPE students from outside, the CPE educator, and then on the right is the warden and the chaplain at Stillwater. So the peer group and the groups can only be up to 8 students. That's the limit, because you do a lot of small group intensive work together. In that peer group, each person is really delving into their own story, kind of core stories that have shaped them in their lives, and doing that reflective work on how those stories have shaped them, have shaped their thinking and feeling and behaving patterns. And then also to reflect upon how those patterns and who they are and their life stories impact them when they're showing up in a spiritual care encounter. And so in group, we explore stories that have shaped us, as well as work we do in our spiritual care encounters with others. It's through a process called verbatims, where you detail an encounter you have with the person that you're offering spiritual care. You bring that reflection back into the group and process together to see, for example, like, what in this visit went well, or where did it go off course? What would be an option in this moment? Or this person said that, and that really got me triggered. What's going on here? So you do that sort of processing work together in the peer group. And this peer group really is there to support each other in growing in their effectiveness as a spiritual care provider, and really, I think, growing into kind of the fullness of their humanity. So that's the work of CPE. And I said, what's unique about this program is that we do this not just with seminarians, not just with people who want to become chaplains, but with those who are incarcerated. I want to say a few words about how this even began and what inspired this program. As I mentioned, I'm a ELCA pastor, and I had done my unit of CPE years ago back at Fairview Southdale. And in 2017, I had left a position I had and wasn't sure what I was going to do next. And I was invited to take a unit of CPE with Sue Ehlers-Hatley, who was the director of the program. And the reason I said yes to doing another unit of CPE was that Sue had shared with me that this unit of CPE that we had been invited to go into Stillwater, which is pictured there on the right, to take part in a 6-week class called Restorative Justice. Curious, restorative justice, is that a concept people are familiar with? Yes, yay. All right, well, we'll talk a little about restorative justice. So in Stillwater, they have a restorative justice council, and it's made up of incarcerated men. And they were teaching a 6-week class on restorative justice. And so I want to say a few words about what restorative justice is. It's a movement that in this country and across the world that seeks a more holistic approach to dealing with crime and its impact than our current criminal justice system does. I would say our system, our criminal justice system, is really good on punishment and retribution. It doesn't really attend to healing and restoration. So restorative justice is based on the belief that each one of us is part of a larger web, a web of relationships, that we are all interconnected. So when there is a crime that's committed, we often think about it's the person who's done the crime and they need to be punished, right? That's how our criminal justice system works. The state brings charges against an individual who's committed a crime. But the folks who are left out of that equation would be the victim's family, the family of the person who committed the crime, and the larger community. But I would say, if you think of any crime, all of those folks are impacted by that crime. And those folks who have been impacted by the crime, in many ways, their needs, their hurts are not tended to in our justice system. So restorative justice wants to look at the full impact of a crime and the ripple effects, not only upon the victim and the offender, but their families and the greater community. And then it wants to look at what can be done to repair that harm, while also holding the person who caused it accountable for their actions. So I like to sum up restorative justice that it's about accountability. It's not soft on crime. No, it's about accountability for one's actions, but it's also about finding repair, ways to repair the harm done. So we were learning about these concepts inside Stillwater, taught by men who had committed crimes, but have taken accountability for their crimes, and now are seeking to be part of a different movement, a movement of accountability and healing. And they were teaching us these concepts. They were showing us how they put it into practice inside prison. They were showing us the ways in which they have taken accountability and responsibility for their own harms, and how they continue to work in making amends and becoming agents of repair and healing in the world. And it was this experience during those 6 weeks that provided the spark to dream how we could support these proven leaders in their ongoing development and growth. And the idea was that we would invite them in to be student chaplains in our CPE program, a program that's really offers graduate level education in spiritual care. And frankly, what these men were doing inside, I saw amazing skills and wisdom that's like, we have a lot to learn from them. It's not just what we're offering to them, but it's like, this is learning that's going to go both ways. And one of the other piece in this, kind of what inspired this dream, was not only how can we support these men and how can we learn from them, but it was also thinking about the needs inside this facility. Stillwater Prison has over 1,200 men. They have one chaplain. Think about that ratio. By offering CPE to incarcerated leaders, our hope was to support the work of the chaplain by having trained spiritual care providers on each unit available to offer care to their peers where they live 24/7. The chaplain who's at Stillwater now is actually an ELCA rostered leader. He's in the St. Paul area synod, in fact. But he is there Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 3:30 or so. He's not there. He cannot be in there every moment. He can't be on every cell block. And so to have trained leaders on each of these units allows really to kind of expand the work. And now the chaplain is able to make referrals to individuals at Stillwater as well. So today, as of today, we have trained over 25 incarcerated leaders inside Stillwater to provide spiritual care to residents. These incarcerated leaders really offer an extension to the chaplain's office. They provide a listening ear, a desire to bring healing to men from diverse religious and spiritual backgrounds. And I want to note here as well the importance of training these men too, is that, we think about oftentimes the word chaplain has often been associated in Christian contexts as a Christian chaplain, whether it be hospital, military. But as you well know, we live in a very multicultural, religiously pluralistic, multi-faith world. The prison, even more so. The number of religious identities in prisons is astounding. It numbers in the hundreds. And so a lot of times the people who hear the word chaplain, they might think Christian. But if you are Muslim, if you are Native American, if you are, the list goes on and on and on, you might not think that you can get care from the chaplain. So we have been training, so our incarcerated leaders also represent a diversity of backgrounds. We've trained men who identify as Buddhist, as Muslim, as interfaith, kind of spiritual but not religious, so to speak, who maybe never saw themselves as religious leaders, but now they've been equipped that they have a broad understanding what spiritual care is. And they now kind of take that mantle on as they go back into their living units and offer spiritual care. Because you think about the need for spiritual care, it transcends all boundaries. The need for healing is a genuine human need. It's not particular to any spiritual or religious tradition. Now, this is a picture of our graduating class from last spring. One of the powers, I think, of this program, and I alluded to it earlier, is just the power of bringing together folks who are inside prison and folks coming from the outside. Together, we form a learning community. There's healing and learning that happens through the community that we form as we kind of undertake this journey of CPE. As we come together, and as I said, we are working on our spiritual care skills, might be around listening or paying attention to our presence, understanding issues around trauma and addiction, substance abuse, around trauma, around racism, institutional racism. We're looking at all sorts of things that we need to know about and learn about, as well as skills to help us support folks, whether they be going through grief, loss, addiction, whatever it may be. We're spending time together learning about those things, developing skills, and increasing our self-awareness about our own patterns in life. I often say that these CPE groups have given me the closest experience of beloved community that I've ever had in my life. It's ironically a community that's been created inside walls of a maximum security prison, walls that have been constructed in order to keep folks like me out, keeping us separated. But now we've gone through those walls and we gather in this space the background, the walls there, the brick you see there, imagine it's a round room. It's the chapel inside Stillwater prison. And I always say I always feel like we should take off our shoes before entering that space. Because it's holy ground. When I'm just always amazed at the power, the transformation that's taking place in that space. It indeed is holy ground. So every Thursday for over 16 weeks, we gather together for nearly 7 hours. And it's really it's powerful for us coming in from the outside, but for men inside, who maybe are accustomed to, they're limited to maybe a 15-minute phone call a day. They have high restrictions on visitors, and a prison lockdown can will immediately shut down. If you have someone on your visitor list and you have a visit scheduled that day, the prison's in lockdown, you're stuck in your cell. You're not going to get a visit that day. So they are often just cut off from any sort of contact with the outside community. And that which they do have is highly restricted. So imagine what it's like for them to have 6-7 hours in one day to spend with folks from the outside community to be in relationship with. And so it's really, for them, it's an extravagant gift of abundant community and genuine connection. And as I said, for those of us coming from the outside, we just have an extraordinary privilege of being in relationship with these men who have experienced healing and transformation in their own lives, and now dedicate to bringing that and offering that to others through the spiritual care that they give. Over the unit, those 16, 17 weeks together, we come to recognize our shared humanity, to see each person created in the image of God. I would say too, I don't always mention this, but my first call was up in Moose Lake, Minnesota. This was back in the 1999 when a young woman, Katie Poirier, was abducted and murdered, if you remember that story. And I was the pastor along with my colleague in that church, in that community. So I always think about that. I hold that experience in Moose Lake and the agony of the murder of Katie and the impact on Katie's family, and was with the family through not only the search for her, but then when they arrested the man who did it, walking with them through the trial and his conviction. So I hold both pieces in the story. And I would say I'm not naive coming into these situations thinking about, yes, people here on homicide charges, they're really just good people at heart. So I'm not naive about it, but I also want to say this, is that as I've got to know the men inside who have done awful things in their lives, to be sure, but there is more to their story. So the theme in worship today about God rewriting our story, in many ways, that's the work we're doing. We're talking about, what defines who a person is. What is the story that defines them? Is it just the one singular story of the worst thing they've done? Or is there a richer, broader story? If someone's experienced healing transformation, does that story get to be told as well? What I've just come to learn over these years in doing this work with the men inside is that every person's story is far more complex than we're often led to believe by society. And for me, the bottom line is this: no one, that includes all of us, no one wants to be defined solely by the worst things we've ever done, right? No one wants to be defined solely by the worst things we've ever done. So now for the next few minutes, this is where it's going to get tricky. We're going to try to do, I've got a couple of video clips, but it's really important for me to have you hear the voices of men, because they're the best spokespersons for their work. But I want to introduce you to a few CPE students and let their voices help you come to understand the powerful work that is taking place. This first person is Dimitri. Dimitri voluntarily chose to work in segregation. You folks know what segregation is? Segregation is, they might call it the hole, you might call it solitary confinement. It's most popularly known as the hole. So there's a whole unit at Stillwater called segregation. In that segregation unit, people are sent there either because they violated a policy or they've been accused of violating a policy. Not everyone who goes back there is guilty. That's a whole other story. In a few instances, some folks are placed back there for their own safety. Well, Dimitri volunteered to work in segregation as a swamper. And a swamper is basically someone who's doing custodial work back there. He's cleaning the bathroom, he's distributing toiletries to the men in their cells. In segregation, basically it's solitary confinement. They are locked in their cells with very little besides their bed for 23 hours a day. They're supposed to get an hour out, if that. And what's really particularly challenging back there is really in a state of solitary confinement. Men who might be struggling with addiction, mental health and behavioral issues, when they're cut off and have even less contact and even less communication with the outside world, it has an impact on their already fragile mental health. So Dimitri sees firsthand the toll, the physical and mental toll it takes on them to be locked in their cell 23 hours a day. Dimitri describes this as a recipe designed to break a person's mental state. As another incarcerated student has said, says prison is a steady stream of trauma. Now this is the video, and it's not showing up, or the sound is not coming through there, but I'm going to find a way to play it here on my computer, because I want you to see.
So I'll work it set.
Okay. Let's see. So you're not going to hear that, but you can see Dimitri talking, and I'm going to play. This works. No, that's.
So I work in segregation, and it's like guys are kicking the doors or yelling. Like that's my indication, like, okay, somebody needs help. So I'll go, and then sometimes it's an incident where they lost a family member, or they have somebody that's in the hospital that they're potentially going to understand, they have limited communication with them because they're in segregation. What I do is I try to come in, present for the person, and hear what they have to say. By anything that I have that I feel like may help objectively, though, like I try to not interject my own personal feelings or beliefs or anything like that. And then if I can, I give them a different perspective. So like sometimes you don't have to say anything at all. Just be there, just your presence.
That come through from these folks? See, we made it work. So that interview with Dimitri, that took place after his first unit of CPE. A couple years ago. Since then, he's fully completed 3 units of CPE, and he's now in our current unit doing his 4th unit. Now, if you caught at the beginning, when I talked about what CPE is, I said 4 units are required to become, well, it's one of the many requirements, but it's one piece in becoming a professional certified chaplain. That's what Dimitri wants to do. He is eager to continue to develop his spiritual care skills so that when he returns to community, that he can mentor young men in particular Men like himself, young men who maybe got caught up in gang-related activity and got caught up in cycles of violence. He wants to step in, those who have been impacted again by generational trauma and community violence. He wants to step in as an interfaith spiritual care provider, a chaplain, and to help guide them into a different way of being, another path, a path of healing and transformation. So Dimitri knows that it takes 4 units of CPE. He knows that it takes a master's degree, and he's working on pursuing that goal. Not only is he doing his 4th unit of CPE, he's also enrolled, working on his bachelor's degree inside prison, and has his eye then moving toward getting his master's degree. And in the meantime, he continues to work back in segregation, looking for ways he can bring a sense of humanity amid very inhumane conditions. In restorative justice, there's this phrase, hurt people, right? Hurt people, hurt people. That, you know, that when someone commits an act of violence or harm another person, it just doesn't come out of the blue. That there's things in their own life and story that have impacted them that they have not healed from. Pain that hasn't been transformed is just passed on. But there's also a way to take that idea of hurt people, and imagine that healed people heal people. That if the harms that we cause damage relationships, that harm happens in relationships, that healing can also happen in relationships. And I think this again is the power of our peer groups, is that we witness each other's life stories, and that we get to know that there's more than a single story to be told about anyone, that every person has a story. There's also a real power in being heard and seen. And I think there's something really healing about that, when your full humanity is recognized and honored. And when healing begins, that the positive effects of that healing start to ripple out. So in this next video clip, we're gonna hear and meet Damien. He's at the podium there. And this was at the spring 2023 graduation, to hear about the healing and transformation that he experienced over this unit. So now bear with me, this will be the last video clip, but we're gonna try this one more time. But it's important, I think, for you to hear it in their own words.
Purpose. And it's a mighty purpose to do something for others, not ourselves. And what I learned was
I'm gonna start that over again. All right, it's a short one. Let's do it again.
We all have a purpose. And it's a mighty purpose to do something for others, not ourselves. And what I learned was it's about selflessness. Not always looking to do things for reward back or for acknowledgement. It's about service, selfless for others. I'm still here because I haven't fulfilled my purpose. It's a good purpose, not a purpose to harm, a purpose to help. And it's a different narrative compared to what I've always been. I've always felt that I was just a great young man that was meant for bad. And the class and people involved
class told me about the good things.
So that was the,
Excuse me, well, he said in the class, people taught me about the,
good
Good
things
things.
they saw in me.
okay, and was that the completion of the sentence? Cause it sounded like I missed one word completely.
I think it was, the gist of it was that they saw the good things in me, and that he had often been kind of felt like defined by, that he had seen himself as a depraved individual,
Yeah.
but they saw the good in him.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that's the essence.
Okay.
I think when you're doing this presentation, it would be good to have a script because it was loud enough, but
It was in and out.
I don't hear different sounds apparently, because I could hear him speak. I couldn't understand his words. If I could read the words with them, I would get it a lot better.
All right, well,
Too late now, but I mean.
yeah, I think part of it is,
Yeah.
going through this to that is not ideal, but,
My ears.
and in essence, what, I mean, I can just tell you a little bit. And this is, you can see Damien, he's right behind me. And that, this was that graduation. I'll just say, I mean, in many ways in that unit, you know, Damien, we talked about exploring stories, that have impacted us, or kind of peeling back the layers of things that have shaped us. And Damien had a real transformative moment in the unit that he recalled a story when he was a young boy. It's his story, I'm not gonna go into the details, but for the group to be able to, it was a real kind of painful moment in his own life. And helped him kind of understand maybe some of the anger that he had been living with his whole life, having roots in that particular story. And as a group, we could witness that story. And in that moment, kind of give him what he needed that he didn't get as a young boy. And to see that there's more to him than the man who's been, sentenced to prison. That he's a man that has caring, compassionate heart. And as he said, that he has a purpose. And that's the clear message for him, is that he experienced healing. People saw the good in him. He now sees himself as having a purpose in his life and a clear mission. So I think that hopefully that gives you the gist of it, and I will have to work on my own. If I don't know, like I haven't figured out yet how to add transcripts to the video, but well, that's step 2. We got the video, at least, so that's a start. So I think there's some, as I said, there's really power, there's power when we come together. We listen with a non-judgmental presence, listen with care and attention, and just really bear witness to a person's pain, but also to the transformation taking place. And when we can see that in others and speak that into their lives, that's what we are equipping these men to do inside Stillwater, that they take what they experience inside that peer group and they take it out into their living units. The final, and this is not a video, so we're good to go. The final voice that I want to lift up is the witness of Dave. This picture is taken after Dave completed 4 units of CPE. Dave's been incarcerated since he was a teenager for over 37 years. For the past year, he's no longer at Stillwater. He had been moved up to Moose Lake, but then for the last year, he had been at Stillwater, serving as a mentor in the St. Cloud facility. You might not know this, but when someone enters the correctional system in Minnesota, they're sent to St. Cloud, where they're basically kind of assessed on where they should serve their sentences. So a lot of folks begin their sentence by going into St. Cloud. The DOC sent Dave there because of the skills he brings. They sent him there to serve as a mentor, to work with those just entering the system, to help them see that prison does not have to be a dead end for their lives, that there are possibilities for change and healing and growth. And in the fourth and final CP unit Dave had, he shared the following with us. And he said shared this at graduation, that one of the blessings that comes with sharing spiritual care in a place with a culture as dark as it is here, it only takes a small light to shine brightly. And I just was struck by this. He shared this in December of 2022. And at every graduation, I reference this because what I see is that the power of light is no small thing. And that light, as we have more and more students take part in this class, in the CPE program, we're just kind of lighting more lights, and that light is spreading and it's growing not only in the facility, but beyond. Remember, restorative justice, it's about the web of relationships, our interconnectedness. And I like to think about that, if we think about not the ripple effects of harm, but the ripple effects of healing. I would say that the success of our program inside is notable. Since 2019, since that first unit in the fall, we did stop because of a thing called COVID. But since then, we have completed 8 units inside Stillwater, training over 25 men. As a set of units, we offer unit from September through December. A spring unit we just started in late January that will go through May. So we offer 2 units a year. Of those 25 men that have been trained, 3 of these men have been released on parole, and they're bringing their spiritual care training into their communities. Others have been transferred to other facilities within the DOC, where they continue to practice spiritual care. These men, whether they're still at Stillwater or in other facilities, they are sought out by other incarcerated individuals who are struggling and need a safe person to talk to, receive guidance and spiritual support. These incarcerated students have really become a peacemaking and stabilizing presence in the prison. This was a picture from graduation in December. The person on the far left is the warden of Stillwater Prison. And in the article that you have, you'll see the warden was interviewed for that. And he describes our CPE program as a glimmer of light. So we have over 1,200 men here. Some of them aren't at this stage where they want to see and make change. If we can get more of that glimmer, that's how lives are transformed. So I love this idea of the light, the glimmer that we're trying to grow and spread. Now, those CPE alums who are still in, those who have graduated from CPE, who've done either 1 unit or multiple units, they are now part of what we call our CPE alumni group. And they now gather together once a month in the chapel to further build on the skills they learned in CPE. So, as I said, usually a peer group will have anywhere from 6 to 8 individuals. For the alums, this offers them a way to kind of still stay plugged into the work of CPE. The man in the center in the green, that is Wahid. He is Muslim, as I mentioned. We've trained a number of folks from different religious, spiritual backgrounds. Wahid's the one who coined this. He says, we're part of the CPE family. And so when someone graduates, when they complete a unit of CPE, he says, welcome to the family. And he'll enter a room and he'll say, hi, fam. Wahid, just this beautiful spirit. He actually, I invite him in to do a lecture on listening, because he is such a great listener, has a remarkable story on how he's practiced his skills as a listener. But I always credit him as like, we're part of the CPE family, and that family continues. when they have their continuing education events. They do learning, they have an opportunity to come together for community, but to continue to grow in their learning and really to strengthen their identity as spiritual care providers. In that spirit of the CP family, I like to think about graduations as family reunions. And this was from spring of 2024. That family reunion. Talking about the ripple effects of prison, or of this program inside prison. I think lives have been changed, but there's also systems being changed as well. Number of CPE students who are inside Stillwater, they've been recruited to serve as restorative justice mentors in a program to help reduce violence within the prison. This violence prevention initiative is being led by a man named Tito Campbell. This is Tito. And if you have a photographic memory, you might have recognized Tito's face from the very first picture I showed you. Tito was a student in that very first unit in fall of 2019. He was incarcerated in Stillwater. He is now out in community working for the Department of Corrections on this violent prevention initiative. So now Tito walks in with the DOC badge. He walks in and out of facilities, and he's working inside the prison, training men in restorative justice, violence prevention. And it's like our programs are collaborating together. So a lot of our graduates are now working with Tito to prevent violence between men who are incarcerated, as well as between staff and incarcerated men. And then just as we began this past unit, I reached out to Tito and I said, all right, who do you have as a mentor who hasn't done CPE that you can recommend for us to be part of our program? So I feel like we're working like slowly but surely. It's like this, we're kind of a grassroots program, but now we have a colleague and friend in Tito who's been designated by the DOC to do this work. And we're working in tandem. Right up here, this man here with the mustache. He was also a graduate of our program who's been released. His name is Fong Lee. He now works for All Square, which is a local nonprofit social enterprise that's really investing people impacted by mass incarceration. They offer education, legal training. They've trained a lot of students as paralegals. There are actually 2 incarcerated students who are working on a law degree. One of those students was one of our CPE alums. So they're really working to try to undo the harms created by the criminal legal system by just changing how the system works. And so Fong now works for them and is taking his skills into the community. The third student who has been released is now living back with his mom down in Texas. And John offers this beautiful quote. He said, and I think it just best describes the power of the program. He said, I thought I was just a single tree. Now I see that I'm part of a forest. And for me, that image of just developing a forest of trees is really what inspires me. It's what drives me. And I'm just trying to do my part, to do my best to nurture and support this expanding forest of spiritual care providers within the walls of prison. Men who are bringing transformation and healing to a place that far too often is a place of despair and violence and hopelessness. So we are a social justice CPE. I didn't get into all the history of that, but we are really kind of a small program. It's now hosted and housed by Volunteers of America. But we're really kind of a small grassroots program. And we are looking ways to continue what we're doing. And I would just ask that there's ways in which you could support. We certainly would appreciate prayer, keeping myself and my colleague Sue as certified educators in your prayer, our CPE students, and all those they serve. We have been doing this program. We had a large gift that allowed us to support the training of incarcerated men, and that gift is now over. And so we're out figuring out ways how to keep this sustained. As I mentioned here, the cost to support an individual who's incarcerated is around $6,200. So if you know of any organizations or foundations or individuals who might have a passion in supporting this work, please be in touch with me. I've got a postcard, an envelope to share with you at the end. We're just trying to keep this going because, as I said, I've seen lives transformed. And I really believe that the healing our world so desperately needs starts in this way. It's healing through relationships and letting that ripple effect spread throughout our communities. So maybe ask for some help in sharing these, and then we'll have some time for any questions and conversations. But I just want to thank you for coming. I've listed up there the website for our program where you can learn a little bit more. There's also my contact information is on these cards that will be handed out, front and back.
Are any of those contact informations in this handout that we received?
There might be at the very end, but if you look at the back of this card, my contact information is there on the back.
The 6,200, is that what your program has to pay, or is that the cost of incarcerating somebody?
No, that's so in terms of in order to offer this program inside, it's not the cost of incarceration, it's the cost really of for a student to take part. So for outside students, there's going to be money that comes in through tuition and through the placement where they're working and doing CPE, so that cost is covered. But for those incarcerated, then they're not able to pay tuition, they're not able to pay for their placement fee in order to do that. So that's the cost relative for the program. Yes.
I noticed that they were wearing regular clothes and not a uniform, which really gives them more dignity. Is that something unusual for that group?
No, I mean, in Minnesota, they have options of what kind of clothing they can purchase. So they're thinking like the jumpsuits or something like that. Yeah. No, and for both men and women, shock would be similar. It's, they have certain issue clothing. So denim shirts, t-shirts, sweats, but it's all standardized. They have choices on what they can wear. Yes.
I'm gonna check my listening. Did you say 1 unit of CPE is 16 weeks long?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the next thing is, you said many of these folks are incarcerated for life.
Well, life sentence, yeah, and
sentence, but there still is the option eventually to be released.
Right. So it's a law question, but like a life sentence would often be, let's say, there are a few people who are sentenced to life without parole, but usually for those who have life sentences, there's always there's the option of parole. And I'm not a lawyer, but I do know this, that this is a statistic that I've got from the DOC. 95% of folks who are incarcerated in Minnesota right now will be coming back into community at some point. There's only a few who are incarcerated with life without parole. There are different appeal processes, but even just the way our system works, Eventually, there's parole and parole hearings. And so I would say this is where we have a stake in our criminal justice system, because if we think about folks coming back into our communities, we want folks to come back in our communities who have not been further traumatized and harmed, and that they're just gonna keep on perpetuating that cycle of violence in their life. But we want people to come back into our communities who have experienced healing and transformation and are bringing back those gifts to our communities. So we think about that number, 95% of folks incarcerated now will be returning to community at some point. That makes a difference. The man, Dave, who's been incarcerated since he's been 16 years old, he is likely going to be released within 6 months. And, you know, I think thinking about the transformation, like, I feel like our lives, our world would be better served by his presence in the world. He's making a difference inside, but he also has gifts to bring. And so that's the kind of transformation I think we're hoping for folks. Is that when they return, they come back wanting to make, as in Damien's words, I've got a purpose to live out. And it's not just a purpose inside, it's a purpose to get out and to make a difference in the world. Yes.
Does this country have the highest incarceration rate in the world? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if, like, China's not great either, but I think percentage wise, we incarcerate more than any other nation. And I would also add, you know, if you're familiar, there's also, and I didn't get into that as well, but there's a very much I would say systemic racial injustice at work here too. If you're familiar with the book, The New Jim Crow, mass incarceration in our society, in many ways, is just a way of extending the impact of slavery and Jim Crow era laws of segregation. The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander is a book that helps you see, I'm like, why is it that African Americans are grossly overrepresented in our criminal justice system? A lot of it is in the ways we've executed our laws. Simple fact, just the ways in which people were prosecuted for drug charges. If you were caught with cocaine, you might often be white and you had a lesser charge. You're caught with crack, lock them up. And so there's just been systemic racism built into our legal system, and Michelle Alexander's book helps describe that. I would say in Stillwater prison, I see the systemic racism at work every time I'm there, because Minnesota's, the demographics of Minnesota in terms of men and women of African descent is around maybe 8-9%. Over 53% of the men incarcerated in Stillwater are of African descent.
And Native Americans?
Native American,
Higher, right?
oh yeah. So Native American, isn't it like less than 1% in Minnesota state demographics? It's over 10% at least in Stillwater.
That's because the system is designed to do just exactly that.
Right, yep. Yeah.
It's our system is absolutely shameful. I mean, we've set it up to do what it's done. And now the right wing just wants to perpetuate that even more. They don't want, I mean, if you were funded by the federal government and Trump got aware of this,
Oh, yeah.
he'd shut you down right now.
Yeah, well, fortunately, it's really quite remarkable we're even in it all. You saw, and you'll see in the article, the warden, who was quoted, the picture of him, but in the very first unit was a different warden. And it was a different chaplain. And so anytime there's leadership changes, you just think like, I hope they'll keep letting us in. Because frankly, there are some in the system, even at Stillwater, unfortunately no one in like higher level leadership, but looking at, they want prison to be punitive. And any sort of opportunity that might bring growth and healing might be looked upon suspiciously. So our program, we're very careful and cautious when we go in because we don't want to do anything to jeopardize the privilege and opportunity we have to go in. So we know we're often being scrutinized by folks who are not excited about outside programs coming in like this. And so, but so it feels a bit subversive going in and doing this work, but yeah, thank goodness we're not under a federal grant because we'd be in big trouble right now.
Cost of incarceration, what is that, any idea? For a person?
Gosh,
per
that's a
year?
good question. I'd have to look that up, but you know, it's obscene, you know. It doesn't serve us well. I mean, I think a lot of folks who are moved in the restorative justice movement will talk about I think what is the cost on human community? It's like how we're creating these systems, these prisons that are punishing people who are acting in ways that are inhumane to somehow tell people that it's wrong to act and treat others inhumanely. You know, it's just the system is not set up in a way to bring healing. And so I feel like what we're trying to do is a bit subversive. Dimitri, the young man, the first video who's working back in segregation, he always describes that CPE is basic humanity because what he experiences on a daily basis is his humanity called into question or just being thrown under the rug. So he's there to claim his humanity and to fight for the humanity of others.
Thank you, very good.
I want to say that what a powerful and hope-filling ministry that you are doing. Wonderful.
Amen.
And I'm part of the CPE family.
All right. Fantastic. Walking would roll me right in. Yeah, but Phil, my contact information is on that blue postcard. So again, if you have any ideas, thoughts of how we keep this going, I welcome. It takes a village, it takes communities to make a difference. Thank you.
Wow.